Good afternoon. This is the second class of complete classical model, and in the previous class of complete classical model we have discussed about the assumptions of the complete classical model. Now in this class we are going to discuss about the major macroeconomic variables. Major macroeconomic variables under classical school. Okay. And then we are going to derive the model graphically and mathematically as well. So saving, the first important variable of classical school. Saving is basically a function of rate of interest. Okay, how? Suppose rate of interest is 2%. In this case, if the rate of interest is 2%, I will be basically saving 2000 rupees in the bank. One minute. If the rate of interest rises from 2% to 12%, I will be basically saving 5000 rupees in the bank. Obviously, right? As the rate of interest is higher, I will be saving more. So as the rate of interest is rising, as the R rise, the savings also rises. If the R is falling, savings will also fall. So it is an increasing function. Increasing functions mean basically that as R increases, savings will also increase. Okay, so savings is a increasing function of interest. Okay, function basically means that son is a function of mother. How? Whatever mother does, whatever action mother takes, that will be affecting son, right? That will be affecting son. So I can write son is a function of mother. Son is a function of mother because the mother's action will affect and impact son. So son is a function of mother. Similarly, saving is affected by rate of interest. Rate of interest is change of rate of interest will impact saving. So I can write saving is a function of income, interest rate. Saving is a function of interest rate. As per the classicals, investment is also a function of rate of interest, but in case of investment, savings are done by the household, investment are done by the producers or investors. Now investors are basically taking loan for their production process, and whenever they are taking loan for their production process, if the rate of interest is higher, if suppose the rate of interest is 2%, they will be taking the loan of 2 lakh for their production process, for buying new capital, buying new machines, etc. But if the rate of interest has risen from 2% to 12%, in that case they will be taking less loan. Suppose they have taken loan of 15,000 only, as now they have to pay higher interest rate on the loan. So that's why they are taking less rupees or less loan in investment. So as rate of interest rises, what is happening? The investment is falling, right? So that's why investment is a decreasing function of rate of interest. I can write it as investment is also a function of interest. Okay, in this case positive function, as interest increases saving will also increase. In this case it is a negative function, as interest increases saving will investment will fall. Saving is equal to total income minus consumption. We all know this, right? That my income is suppose 5k and my consumption is 3k. So if I what I mean the remaining 2k, this is my consumption 3k, this is my total income 5k. The remaining 2k is basically saved, right? So how saving the 2k is determined? It is determined by 5k minus 3k, that is income minus consumption, that is written here. Demand for labor is a decreasing function of real wage. Real wage, I have discussed about real wage in the previous section. If you don't get the idea of real wage, please watch the previous video in the playlist. Now as real wage means what? Purchasing power, purchasing capacity. As the purchasing power increases, what will happen? I will be basically uh, demand for labor. Let me just clarify it. Demand for labor is basically done by the producers. Demand for labor is done by the producers. Now if the purchasing power increases means what? Wages are increasing, that's why wage by price are increasing, right? If wages increases, only then the wage by price will also increase. Now when wage by prices are increasing or rising, that means wage are rising, that's why wage by price is also rising. What will happen? The producer or the farm owner or the production owner will basically demand for lower laborer, demand for less amount of laborer, less number of laborers in the production process. Why? Because the wage that he has to pay to the laborers has actually increased. So that's why the producer will now demand for lower amount of laborer. So as the wages increases, or we can also say the real wages W by P increases, the demand for labor done by the producers falls, as they have to pay higher wages to the laborers now. Okay. And supply of labor, I have already discussed it in the previous section, that supply of labor is basically done by the laborers. Now when the laborer will be willing to work more, when the laborer will be willing to make themselves available to the economy, make themselves available to the production process, when their purchasing power will rise, or we can say when their real wages will rise, or we can also say when their wages will rise, right? Wages rising mean, what does it mean? If wages are rising, that means real wage is also rising, right? So when their real wages are rising, W by P is rising. Let me just clarify it. This is W by P. Suppose it is 200 by 25. So it is 8. Now wages, so this is purchasing power. That means whatever wage the producer is getting, by that wage he can actually get 8 products. I have discussed all this in the previous lecture. Okay, yet I am discovering it anymore. I mean one more time. So now when the wages have actually increased, and the wages now has become from 200, it has increased to 400. So now the purchasing power will be 16. So the laborer will think that in the previous real wage, in the previous purchasing power, I was actually capable of purchasing or buying 8 products, and as per my current real wage, when the real wage has increased, I am capable of buying 16 products. So as real wage rises, real wage or purchasing power rises, what is happening? The supply of labor is also rising. The producer and the laborers are ready for working more, or the laborers are making themselves available to the market. So as the purchasing power or real wage rises, what is happening? The supply of labor is also rising. So supply of labor is a positive function. Why positive function? As the real wage rises, the supply of labor is also rising. Demand for labor equal to supply of labor, we will see this thing, this assumption 8, this not assumption but this variable 8, we will see this thing in the next segment. People demand for money for transactions and precautionary purposes, and speculative motive is not present in the classical model. I have already discussed it in the previous assumption section, that speculation motive, that is the motive of holding money for investing, or motive of holding money for earning interest rate, that motive of holding money is not present in the classical model. Demand for these purposes is a function of income. Obviously as my income rises, I will be um, demanding more money for transaction and precaution. I will be demanding more money for doing transactions and precautions. Demand for money is equal to supply of money, that is the equilibrium condition of money market. This 8, 9 and 10 will come in the next segment. Okay, I will discuss it then. Let me just go to the next section, because all of these things that are written here are basically more clearly explained in the next section. So we know that there are basically 3 market. One is commodity market, then comes good market, then comes money market, and then comes labor market. So three equations from each of these three markets. If we at first talk about the commodity market, there is a saving function, and we have already discussed about this thing, that saving is a function of rate of interest, and I have written it in the form of saving is a function of I. This f is basically a symbol of function, but we can also use s as a symbol of function. So this also means saving is a function of interest rate. We can write it in this way also and this way also, both are correct. So this is the saving function, this is the investment function, we have discussed about it. And the equilibrium condition for the commodity market will be where the savings and investment will be equal, I will show it graphically also. Next is, in the next segment I will show that. Next comes money demand function. Money demand is basically a function of income and prices. Okay, so money demand is written as K into P into Y, where Y is the income, P is the price level, and K is the proportion of income that we are willing to keep in our pockets for doing precautionary and transactionary spending. Okay, suppose my income is 1000 rupees and I am keeping 800 rupees in my pocket, so my money demand is 800. How is this 800 is determined? It is K into Y. Suppose K is 0.8 into 1000, that will be 800. Okay, so this K is basically 0.8. What does it denote? It denotes that how much of our income we want to keep in our hand. Out of our income, how much we want to keep in our hand, that is represented by this K. And price is also considered here and multiplied with K and Y in the money demand function. As if price are too much in the economy, then we will be demanding more money. We will be willing to keep more money in our hand. And if prices are too low in the economy, we will be trying to keep less amount of money in our hand, as the products are cheaper now. But if the products are very expensive and the prices are very higher in the economy, we will try to keep more money in our hand, we will demand more money. So that's why price is also taken here. Money demand equals to K into P into Y. And money supply, we already know money supply is constant. We have written it in the explained it in the assumption, right? So money supply is given and it is constant and it is M0. M0 is basically nothing but representing a constant. Equilibrium condition is basically, equilibrium condition in the money market is money demand equals to money supply, MD equals to M0. Aggregate production function. Now we are coming money market. What is the demand function of money market? This. Supply function of money market, this. And equilibrium condition in money market is where money demand and money supply are equal. Equilibrium condition in commodity market is where saving and investment were equal. Now coming to the labor market. So this is the production function of the labor market. This tells us that Y, that is the amount of output produced in the economy, depends on N, that is the number of workers in the economy, and K, that is the number of capitals or machines in the economy. Okay, so if more numbers of workers are working in the economy, then output or Y will be high. If less numbers of workers are working, then output in the economy will be low. K is basically the capitals. If capitals are more employed in the economy, machines are more in the economy, output will be higher. So that is the aggregate production function of the labor market. And labor demand function. So labor demand function is basically a very interesting. Let me just explain it. So how much amount of wage or how much amount of real wage a labor should get. So basically, suppose one labor comes. There were already 200 laborers working in the factory, and one labor additional come, and that due to that one labor who has additionally joined the production process, due to that additional one labor, the output has increased by suppose 15 units. The output has increased by 15 units. So what is marginal productivity of labor? Marginal productivity of labor means due to 1 unit additional amount of laborer, how much production or output has increased. Due to one more laborer, due to 1 unit more or additional laborer, how much output or production has increased. This is what we understand by marginal productivity of labor. Okay, so marginal productivity of labor is basically nothing but 15. Now how much real wage, that is W by P, real wage means purchasing power, right? How much should be the real wage or how much should be the purchasing power of this new labor? Suppose the name of the labor is A. How much should be the purchasing power or how much real wage should this new laborer receive from the farm? So as per the classicals, this new laborer will receive a purchasing power or real wage equivalent to 15. Purchasing power or real wage means what? How many amount of a product the labor will be able to purchase from the market. So the income that he is getting from this farm, the real wage, from that income the real wage should be 15. Why? As per the classicals, the real wage or the purchasing power that a labor is receiving should be equal to his marginal product, So can I write marginal productivity of labor is equal to the real wage of the labor? Yes, I can write that. Now marginal productivity of labor is what? Change in output because of change in labor. Change in output because of change in labor, del Y by del L, right? By not writing delta, I can also write it with D. D also denotes change. Okay, so dy by dl is equal to W by P. Now if I take P on the left hand side, it will become P into dy by dl is equal to wage. Okay, so that is given here as labor demand function. It tells us that the real wage of a labor should be equal to the marginal product of that labor. Okay, and labor supply function, labor supply N is the number of workers. Here L is not given, here I have done it with L, but here it is N given. Okay, N means number of workers, N and L are actually the same thing. So N, labor supply function, this is the number of workers, how many worker will be willing to work, that number of worker is a function of real wage. If real wage is more, that means their purchasing power is more. With their received income, they can purchase more amount of product. If their real wage is increasing, that means their purchasing power is increasing. That means they can purchase more products from the market now. Then they will be able to work more. They will be supplying more laborers, right? More laborers are then supplied, so the supply of labor will also rise. Okay, so supply of labor is a function of what? Function of real wage. I can write it as S of L naught. I will write it as N. Supply of labor is denoted by SL, and in the place of function I can write it by N. N is a function of W by P. That is what written here also as labor supply function. And the labor market will be equal when the demand of labor and supply of labor will be equal. So there are basically three markets in the economy: commodity market, money market, and labor market. Labor market is in equilibrium when the demand for labor and supply of labor is equal. Money market is equilibrium when the money demand and money supply are equal, and commodity market are in equilibrium when savings and investment are equal. In the above simultaneous equation, we have 9 variables: y, that is output; n, that is number of workers; w is wage; p is price; money demand; money supply, that is m0; s, that is savings; I is investment; and I is interest rate. We can start solving with 7, 8 and 9. By solving the equation 7, 8 and 9, we can find out y, n and w by p. From this we can get y. Then using equation 4, 5, 6, we can use y to ascertain p. The first three equations determine the interest rate independently. Okay, you don't require to need this, neither you require to write this. I mean, this part you don't need to even read or to even write, but this is basically a method by which, I mean, if you can write it, obviously do write it, but it is not required, as we will solve it graphically. So how to solve these 9 simultaneous equation systems, that solution is not required, but if you are capable of taking the idea, please take it. Okay, so if you solve this 7, 8 and 9 equation, you can actually find out the value of y, n and w by p, that is real wage. And from by later on, if you put the value of y in equation 4, 5 and 6, you will get the value of all the variables. And by solving equation 1, 2 and 3, you can actually get the value of equilibrium rate of interest, R. Okay, so it is not required to be written, but if you can get the idea, then very good. Otherwise we can leave it and we will try to solve it graphically. Okay, so at first we will basically be drawing part A. So let me just show you what is in the part A. Part A is basically the, 1 minute. Part A depicts the labor market situation and determines equilibrium real wage rate and equilibrium employment. So basically we will be treating this graph as part A. Okay, this graph as part A. Now in the y-axis we will be taking real wage, and in the x-axis we will be taking number of workers or number of employment or number of laborers. Okay, so now as we have seen from the previous section, that when real wage rises, w by p rises, demand for labor falls. I have explained it in the earlier section also. So that means the graph will be, let me just explain it with a very simple example. If a rises, two variable, a rises and b also rises, or if a falls and b also falls, this is called direct relationship. This is called direct relationship, and in this case the graph is like this, increasing, upward sloping. And in the opposite case, suppose when a rises but b falls, but or a falls, b rises, in that case the relationship is called inverse relationship or negative relationship, and the graph is downward sloping or negatively sloped and like this. Okay, so this is the concept of real wage. This is the concept of graph. Okay, now let me show you. So real wage, when real wage increases, demand for labor falls. That means the relationship is negative, inverse. So we will be having a graph like this, downward sloping curve. And in case of this is called demand for labor. And when real wage increases, supply of labor also increases. We have seen that in the from the previous section. So here the graph will be like this, upward sloping. This is basically the supply of labor. Okay, so this is nothing but equilibrium. This point denotes, this point E denotes equilibrium. This is the equilibrium real wage, equilibrium real wage, and this is what the equilibrium level of labor output, equilibrium labor, you can say this is the equilibrium labor, or this is full employment labor. Full employment labor means here demand of labor and supply of labor are equal. Here demand for labor and supply of labor are equal. So that's why it is full employment. Why is both of them are equal? Because the line demand of labor and supply of labor are cutting at point T, and that point is giving us this NF, right? So this is the level of employment, this is the level of number of workers where the demand of labor in the economy and supply of labor in the economy are equal. Okay, from this part A we will be leading to part B. This is the part B. Part B represents the aggregate production function depicting the relationship between Y and N. In the x axis we will take N, in the y axis we will be taking Y, that is output. Okay, so this N will be determined from where? This N will basically come from the figure A. From the figure A, we will take it from the figure A, and this is the level of N that will be determined. Okay, and production function, what will be what will be the shape of production function? Production function is basically Y is a function of N and K. I have already shown it to you, all of you, in the previous part. And as output rises, N rises, obviously production as N or labor employment or labor productivity rises, output will also rise. So direct relationship. So the curve will be a upward sloping curve like this. Okay, so this is basically the production function. Y is a function of N and K, and if we take from this point, right, we will be getting this is basically NF, and this NF is coming from the graph of part A. It will not be derived automatically. This NF will be coming from the graph of part A. Okay, and if we go to the y axis, this will be the level of output. This is the level of output. I am denoting it as YF. Why YF? Because this is the level of output at full employment level. This is the level of output at full employment level. That's why it is called YF. Output at full employment. Okay, so part A and part B clear. Now part C. In part C we have in part C we have money demand. Money market equilibrium is shown here in part C. Okay, and in the x-axis we will take basically, in the x-axis we will be basically taking M0, that is money supply, equals to KPY, that is money demand. You can go through the previous parts if you have doubt regarding this. That is the condition of money market equilibrium, right? This is money supply equals to money demand. This is the condition of money market equilibrium. Now M0 equals to KPY. I can also write it as M0 by K equals to PY, right? And in the y-axis I will be taking Y, right? So this Y will actually be derived from the part B. So the employment of part A is, or the output, the employment or labor of the amount of labor or the employment of part A is giving us the amount of labor or employment at part B. Similarly, the output at full employment in part B is giving us the output at part C. And what will this graph look like? This graph will basically look like P and Y are being multiplied, and M0 by K is constant. Why M0 by K is constant? As I have already discussed it many times that M0 is money supply and money supply is constant, and K is basically a constant that I have already discussed. So P and Y is multiplied and the result is basically a constant. When two variables are multiplied, two variables, that is P and Y, they are multiplied and their result is constant. Let me just interpret it, because this is a very important part that you have to know from the scratch. If suppose A and B are two variables multiplied with each other, okay, and their result is constant. Constant means a number, suppose 2. Then the graph will be basically looking like this. It is called rectangular hyperbola. It is called what? It is called rectangular hyperbola. Okay, so basically in this case As you can see, p and y are multiplied with each other and the result is constant. The graph will be basically looking like this, a rectangular hyperbola. A rectangular hyperbola. Okay. And this graph is named as m0 by k equals to py. Okay. And from this graph we are getting this point, which is basically price level, which is basically the price level at full employment level, price at full employment level. Okay. Because as you can see that y, this p and y, m0 by k is constant, p into y is on the y axis and p is on the x axis. Here we have p, right? On the x axis we have p here, and on the y axis we have y only, right? So here we have obtained full employment level from part B. This is part C. From part B we have full employment level, and from the x axis we have price at full employment level. Okay. Now this price will be taken into consideration into part D, and this real wage of part A will again come into consideration in part D. This is the part D. In part D we will be basically depicting the relationship between wages and price. Okay, wages and price. Now 1 minute. Yeah. So in part B we are basically having prices on the x axis, right? This price is coming from the part C, the x axis of part C, and on the y axis we are having real wage, which is coming from part A. So all the four graphs are basically connected, right? And as you can see that what is the relationship between these two variables, right? I am going to explain it with the help of wage and price. So basically, as price will wage by price is given here, p is given here and wage is given here. So the relationship is basically positive and direct relationship. Okay, so this will be the graph that will go. It is called wage by price at full employment. Wage by price at full employment. This is the price at full employment, and this is basically the wages by price at full employment. Or for simplicity of understanding, we can also take this as, suppose for the simplicity of understanding, if you want to take 1 minute, if you only want to take wage on the y axis, that you also can do. Okay, if you only take wage on the y axis, that is also allowed. Okay, but this line will be called as real wage at full employment level. So these are the four graphs that we have determined, and after doing all these four graphs we have determined the equilibrium wage rate, that is WF. We have determined the equilibrium price level, that is PF. We have determined the equilibrium employment rate, that is NF. We have determined the equilibrium output rate, that is YF, and we have determined the equilibrium, all of those things are determined. So what was the name of the classical theory? That is income and employment, output and employment determination. So equilibrium output is determined. This is the equilibrium output YF, right? Equilibrium employment is determined where? At this NF level. So equilibrium output and employment are determined. Now one part is remaining, that is part E, and part E consists of it will give us the equilibrium of the good market. It will give us the equilibrium of good market, that is, this is a very simple part, that the savings and investment will be on the x axis and rate of interest will be on the y axis, and we know that when rate of interest rises, saving also rises, so it is a positive function, and when rate of interest rises, investment falls, so it is a negative function. So 1 minute, I have actually done it a little wrong. um, yeah. So this is investment, and if you draw this line, it will be the equilibrium rate. It is basically the point where the savings and investment is equal, and if you go to the y-axis, it is the equilibrium rate of interest. This equilibrium rate of interest is such rate of interest where savings and investment are equal. Okay, so savings and investment are equal at r rate of interest or at r0 rate of interest. Now these four graphs are connected with each other. All of these four graphs, part A, part B, part C, part D, are connected with each other, and change in any of the variables will lead to change in other variables also. But this part E is not connected to any of the graphs above. Part E is completely segregated from all of those things, and I can show it with the help of equations also. As you can see from the equation, R rate of interest is present in only two equations, that is 1 and 2. The other equations 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, R or rate of interest is not present. So rate of interest is present only in equation 1 and 2. That's why those two equations, that is saving and investment, are exogenously and independently determining the rate of interest, and they doesn't have any connection shared with the other variables or with the other figures, but the remaining other four figures are to be determined separately. So here from all of this we have determined the equilibrium price level at full employment, output at full employment, employment at full employment, real wage rate at full employment, and even we have also determined the equilibrium rate of interest where the savings and investment are equal. This is the concept of complete classical model with the help of graphical and mathematical approach.